A very warm good evening to everyone watching us, to Johnites across the country and across the world. This is the second episode of the Johnite Tales. And before we move forward with this very special episode today, in a week when Valentine's Day was celebrated, I would now like to invite our president, Dr. Anthony Robert, to share some message and words of love. Dr. Robert, all yours.
Thank you, Nitin, for putting me on the spot with the message of love. Good evening, dear Johnites. It's a great opportunity again to present this time a couple Johnite who are both Johnites who Nitin thought we should do this couple because it was Valentine's Day. And I thought it would be in the season of a thing. Obviously, apart from their love for each other, it is their love for their work with Sochara, which they do, and also their great love for St. John's and for the student community in St. John's. I think that's what makes this particular episode so special. Our first one with Dr. Salim Yusuf was really, really great. And I really wish this evening a grand success. And we hope to see you again the next month. We want to make this an annual feature. And if any of you have suggestions for any other Johnites who you know, whether in your batches or in your friend circle, do let us know. Do let Prithvi or Nitin or myself know on any of our handles which are there. Over to you, Nitin, and all the best.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Robert, for always being encouraging and supportive for all the initiatives that we propose as such. It's my privilege to welcome two people that I have the fortune of knowing well over the years. They walked the ramp as Raj Kapoor and Nargis almost 10 years back during the Golden Jubilee curtain raises. And today, when we are heading towards Diamond Jubilee and in the week of Valentine's, like I said, it's very apt that we are joined by two people who have been pioneers in the field of community health and public health as such. They've served as advisors in various capacities to the WHO, the ICMR, the National Rural Health Mission, and really it has been their philosophy and ideas which they are implementing through their organization Sochara. And it's not just that, they have been a mentor and inspiration to many young Johnites and even those from other institutes over many, many years to go out there, serve in the field, and being very inspirational and encouraging personalities as such. It's my privilege and fortune to welcome Dr. Ravi Narayan and Dr. Thelma Narayan to the Johnite Tales episode 2. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi and Dr. Thelma, for joining us. So like I said, it's a great honor to have a power couple during the week of Valentine's Day. And like Dr. Robert rightly put it across, it's not just your love for each other, but love for public health in India, love for St. John's, which so passionately stands out as such. Any first thoughts as such?
Thank you, Nitin. It's really lovely to be back, as always, in the St. John's community. We love interactive and offline meetings, and my great favorite is the cafeteria. But we are slowly, since COVID pandemic, getting used to these Zoom sessions as well. So we look forward to sharing our journeys and the wonderful effects the spirit of St. John's has had on our lives since we both started.
Yeah, it's lovely to be with all of you with this the run up to the Diamond Jubilee, and we hope that the follow up to the Diamond Jubilee will be as energetic as the preparations for all the jubilees. So it's great to be with all of you and look forward to our chat.
Right. So I think you made a very important point, the spirit of St. John's. And irrespective of what jubilee it is, I think it's very important that the spirit of St. John's sustains as such. So that brings me to my first question to you, Dr. Ravi. St. John's has transformed beyond recognition, even sometimes when people visit the campus now after many years. The famous red building is now replaced by a more expansive building as such. The classrooms have undergone a lot of change. But today we know you're a great storyteller, and we want you to transform us all back into the 1960s, when St. John started out as a small, humble institute. How was a day in the life of a Johnite in the 60s?
Well, that's a lovely question because it completely goes back down memory lane. And particularly for a Johnite like me, from the first 5 batches, we know you're going to make the first 10 batches Diamond Jubilarians. But the first 5 batches are particularly special, not only to me, but their experience, because I say the first 5 years was what we call the no medical college phase. There was no medical college. And I remember when I'm the third batch, Mary is the first batch, Prem second batch, for those of you who need to have such links, and I'm the third batch. The first 5 batches started life in St. Mary's Orphanage. Most of you don't know that ever since 1962, when St. John's became the memorial to the first visit by a Pope to India, and it was called the Living Memorial. And all that we do and all Johnites have been doing all over are supposed to be a representative of the Living Memorial. There was no building, there was no place, there was no land. And the Catholics in 5 cities vied with each other to try and host this: Bangalore, Mangalore, Bombay, Chennai, and so on. And the Catholics in Karnataka won the bid because the government of Karnataka at that time knew that if the church starts anything in India, and they've had St. Joseph's and all the mission institutions, so they immediately got 166 acres of land from the farmers in this area, and they offered it to St. John's, and that was the clinch things. And so St. John's moved to Bangalore, and that's how we're all here. Now, the interesting part of it is that for the first, St. John's was made the memorial in 62, and St. John's started in 63. There was such excitement. And most people don't know that this excitement was not because from 62 to 63, but had started in 1942, when Sister Mary Glowry had dreamt of a Catholic college. And for many of St. Johnites, I don't think know the most important part of our history, that for 20 years, 42 to 62, one day in the year in all Catholic churches was called Hospital Sunday, and the collections were put together for this wonderful place that was going to come finally, called St. John's Medical College. And therefore, we are at the apex of mission hospital pyramid, and the aspirations of these people are there. Now, when we came here, there was no college. We had St. Mary's Orphanage, and St. Mary's Orphanage for the first 5 years was our college. And just today, in fact, Thelma discovered that I did my anatomy and physiology and biochemistry in St. Mary's Orphanage. I never worked in the new red buildings. We moved to the red buildings only in 68. So the first 5 years was St. Mary's Orphanage, and it's still there. The building, you can go and see it. It is now an orphanage. And the hostels those days was a big bamboo hut, the thatched hut, which was for the men, and some convents around and other people had provided some facilities for the women students. And so this was the Bamboo Hut Hostel. It has lots of stories. I won't go into them. The other second part of the whole life was that it was a national college. One idea, it is the first 10 batches got, that we were not a college in Karnataka. We were a college for India. Our selection was all India. Our staff was all India. If you see the names of the first group of staff who came to teach us, Mehta from Gujarat, Kalyankar from Maharashtra, Sharmas from Delhi. It was such a galaxy of people. And this spirit is what we all picked up, even though we were pioneers. Our students lived in bamboo huts, and we did everything in that St. Mary's Orphanage. When you go to the thing, you find from anatomy, dissection, and so on. So I would say that is how, and at the time, it was very simple. If you go to St. Mary's Orphanage, the life of St. John started getting up in the morning in the hostels. Those of us who were day scholars would cycle from different parts of Bangalore. So cycling became a great bonding for the day scholars. And we'd all have all our work was in that little orphanage. It's, of course, quite a large building, and it's one of the largest orphanage buildings in Bangalore. And that was our first 5 years. And suddenly in 68, we moved to this new campus. And this new campus was like so different. There was huge brown building, and also so that was really very, very nice. And the whole thing changed with the hospital, and there was no hospital those days. We had St. Martha's Hospital. And to me, when you say life of St. John's, it started in the hostel, getting into buses, going to St. Martha's, coming back. And that was really part of the sort of life we lived. So from a pioneering no medical college phase to a rural medical college phase. I'll stop here and, maybe Thelma tell you the feel of
that's very, very nostalgic to hear, to hear about the hospital Sunday mass, where really the prayers and the collections from to doing anatomy and physiology in St. Mary's Orphanage. I mean, some of us can't even fathom what that would have entailed as such. So we come to you, Dr. Thelma, and you were possibly in the next decade of St. John's, when St. John's really started to grow as such in the 70s, so to speak. What are your memories of student days, particularly about the culturals and sports as such? There was PPC, the pre-professional course that was taking place. Any memories of the vibrant cultural and sports atmosphere at that point of time?
Yes, I think for many of us coming from different parts of the country, I came from Madhya Pradesh. And since we had a whole year of pre-professional course, which we basically had time just to ourselves, and we don't really have to work very hard, St. John's was a fantastic, sort of, should I say, an oasis of culture and sport. So it's ranged from, class cultural events to inter-class cultural events to intercollegiate cultural events, etc. I remember in our first year, we were doing this. We were all bussed off to Jayanagar, and our class, late Shri Prasad, whom you may know, who was also our batch rep, taught us all this. We did a Kannada dance, Jakkanaka, and then we also participated quite actively in sports, whether we were very sportsy or not. So we had a throw ball court just next to the C block, where every evening people would come and play throw ball. The basketball courts had come up. So by the time in the 70s, we were on campus, we were in the hostel. And actually, the girls in our batch was distributed across the hostel. So I was in B block actually with 3 others, 1 nun and 2 other girls. So 3 of us girls and a nun in the warden's quarters of B block. And similarly, there was another small group of 4 in the A block. And whenever we used to come out of the hostel, we'd get out of the block, sometimes buckets of water would be thrown on us, or sometimes we'd find a snake coiled around our door. And, so there was fun and games. It was also the time of the Indo-Pak War. And so everything was blacked out. So even the mess hall had to be covered with, with sort of brown paper so that the lights wouldn't be seen. And we had to go with our torches to the mess hall, and it was actually, so that added, I would say, to the cultural ethos of the place. But the sporting activities, I must say, our founder, Dean Dr. Montero, had established very sound foundations for both. So he even selected students who were good in sports, So they set the bar pretty high. Our batch actually won I think it was 1974, I'm not exactly sure, but we won the inter-class trophy that year, with everybody chipping in little bits, but we had some stellar sports persons in our batch, also hockey players. And I remember Hunga Shaw, who was a couple of years junior to us, actually trained the hockey players, and they had one huge event where they won the intercollegiate at the Solomon Police Grounds, and everybody was out there in their bus. And the staff were all participating. The staff were very, very part of all our events. They used to come even with their families. So I remember Dr. Montero set up the Onam celebrations, and that was one of our first cultural events. And the mess hall looked like magical with all those lamps, and everybody had to dress in the traditional style. And we celebrated Diwali, we celebrated all sorts of things. And Dr. Montero's wife had a very soprano voice, and she used to come and sing Rise India, so they were very nationalistic in their feeling. That's why this national selection of staff, we had extremely good staff, so who also supported culture and sports.
Wow. I mean, hearing some of those stories really gives goosebumps. I mean, during Indo-Pak war, covering the mess with the rappers, walking with torch. And, I think a very important point that you brought about, I mean, everyone always wonders when the Onam celebration started in St. John's, but we here have someone today speaking about the first time the Onam celebration started off as such. We now move to what really became the passion for both of you, and that is with regard to community medicine and public health as such. And that's where I want to start with you, Dr. Ravi. You always have told some of us about the impact that the Dr. Dennis Burkitt lecture had for you, and how you transitioned that to the Health for All, the Alma Ata declaration that came. Can you just tell us, as a young medical student listening to Dr. Dennis Burkitt, how did that impact you to move towards in your journey of public health?
Well, since you've heard my stories, actually it starts slightly different. As a young intern, as you know, I was among 3 young interns, Vikram, Venugopal, Gauri, Tatil, who was from the second batch, Prem's batch. We 3 volunteered very strangely to go and work in the East Pakistan refugee camps when 9 million people had walked across a 1,000-mile border, and the government of India was forced to set up 1,000 camps. And we were so desperate, they said any doctors, nurses, social workers from any part of India. And Bangalore University very strangely passed it. If any one of us interns could go there, we could, if any of our interns would go there, it'd be 3 months of their public health posting. So to me, that was my life-changing experience. I went there, came back after 3 months. I spent all the 3 months. And what was interesting, I wrote little postcards. All of that has been put together now. I used to be put up on the hostel mess hall, and 25 students and interns followed, all the way up to people like students were Wenzel Vass and Marian Kamath, and the interns were Christopher Matthias and a whole lot of others who went. So 25 of us had this first experience, and St. John's was very proud of us because we had lived the aspiration. He shall live because of me. And, people had gone across. And when I came back, very strangely, I went to my dean and told him, I don't want to work in a hospital any longer. I want to work in the community. And believe it or not, Dr. Montero, rather than thinking that this is a very odd thing for a nerd like me, who had, topped and all the sort of things, Bhopal medalist and all that, to do, he said, okay, maybe there's something in what this guy is saying. So I was the first and only registrar in community medicine in St. Martha's Hospital. And I spent 6 months there, running a staff clinic, staff creche, cancer detection center. Otherwise, I was staff of PSM department, but I was not in the medical college. I was here. During those 6 months, London School and St. John's, not because of me, their own thing, decided to work together. And I then got a fellowship. So when Christopher got his Rhodes Scholarship, I got my Ross Fellow. We both went to England. And it was in England that the most memorable part is what you're saying, when Professor Dennis Burkitt, who's well known for Burkitt's lymphoma, who just headed the Medical Research Council, came and told us that if you really want to be doctors of the future, you have to be tap turners off, not floor moppers. And he meant that rather than worrying about disease, you've got to start worrying prevention and how you close the tap of disease, how you unblock the sink. So at the societal level, and that really moved me. So when I came back, I decided, a very strange thing happened when I came back. I came back and suddenly found that St. John's had decided, nothing to do with me either. 1962, 63, they started. 72, they had a evaluation, and the evaluation said, hey, listen, you guys are all the same, saying in your prospectus, you want to go community, but there's nothing community in your medical education. So you must change. So the first thing they did was change the department PSM to community medicine department. And yours truly was the first. I went as lecturer of PSM department, came back as lecturer of community medicine department, and all of us then changed. And that was a fantastic period when I worked with, many of you don't realize, but all of you are so familiar with Muglur. Muglur was one of the 12 centers that a group of us built up. And just like me, then Thelma arrived after the Andhra cyclone. Shirdi arrived after his army camp.
We'll just
get into community medicine and do this. And so that's how my life started. How it came to People's Health Movement will come later. In
Yeah.
St. John's, it was all
We'll just,
community medicine, thanks
yeah,
to
we'll
you.
just bring in Dr. Thelma here. And in those days, possibly being a clinician or moving into the hardcore clinical fields would have been possibly more fascinating, or would possibly be have been the viral trend, so to speak, amongst most students as such. What made you move towards community medicine and public health, apart from the fact that Dr. Ravi was there, if I might add? But what really made you move towards community health as such? Were there any incidents during your UG days? And we have heard some of them, but if you could tell in your own words some experience that really told you that, yes, this is going to be my chosen path as such.
Well, actually, I really loved clinical medicine, and I made full use of all the postings we had. And we had, as I was mentioning earlier, very, very good staff who were very inspirational, both clinical but also pre and para, because that lays the foundation for a good clinician. But what happened was that right from early days, even when we were in PPC and were learning, some of us from the north were learning Kannada. We used to go to the friary, and from then we started visiting the homes. This father decided that he's going to teach us Kannada by taking us for home visits in Madiwala, and we used to go to homes which were of people who were really poor. So that was, in a way, my first introduction coming from, I hadn't really done that before. And then I think spirit of adventure used to take us for long walks. So we used to walk across the fields to Jakasandra and to Agara, and the hospitality of, we just walked into people's homes and said hello in broken Kannada, and people were so hospitable. I can still smell the rice and the sambar and rasam which they gave us to eat, with just some vague two students arriving there. And so in a way, it developed a love for people and their families, and the sort of hospitality one received, the respect just by saying you're medical students, etc. So I think those experiences actually furthered, because we ran a St. Luke's Medical Guild clinic in the Friary, and we had interns as well as some of the seniors, and we as very junior PPC and first MD students, we'd be sweeping and doing but also started doing dressings and giving injections, etc. So I think it was a combination of practical experience. So the clinical work, we actually were taken even to Bowring Hospital, to Victoria Hospital, to CSI Hospital, because we used to go to St. Martha's otherwise. And some of us who were particularly keen used to go and visit Victoria even otherwise. We just wore our lab coat and went, and the watchmen and all there didn't know which students we were. And, they never asked who we were and which batch. So we saw clinical cases. I remember clearly the Victoria Hospital had, immense clinical material. But the experience that actually changed my life path, I was very keen on pediatrics or psychiatry, was, volunteering during the internship for the Andhra Pradesh cyclone relief camps. So the first camp, actually, Dr. Francis said, I had volunteered also, but he said, no, only the boys would go. And, so I thought that was a bit of gender discrimination. But anyway, I stayed on and said, I'll go for the second camp then. And fortunately, Dr. Padmini Ars, who was our professor of pediatrics, agreed to, she was leading the second team. So I went along with her. It was quite an experience because, in a way, the boys had to dig up their own, sanitary pit latrines and all of that. But for the girls were very few. I mean, there were like 2 or 3 of us. And we were staying somewhere else where we actually had to go to the fields to do our business in the morning, and so it was a different experience. The roads were all damaged and we had to walk from village to village. There was a phenomenal outbreak of, diarrhea, dysentery. And then I did some walks around the village and I found the carcasses were still there full of flies. And, and I was seeing these cases, I was drop dead just treating them, because at some point of time, there was only one of us running each clinic. We were distributed in different villages. So I actually said that I'm going to close the clinic and go back to Bangalore if we don't do something about it. And we were staying in a camp with about several hundred Jesuits, and every evening we'd have a camp meeting. They agreed to my thing. So I actually closed the clinic for a couple of days. I don't know, I'm sure it was not ethical, But the whole village then came out. We cleared all the carcasses, and lo and behold, the outbreak sort of subsided. So that was, but more than that, I think it was again this love and hospitality of people that really touched me. They all said that, they had lost lives, they had lost possessions, they had lost livelihoods, but they still said that, they were so thankful to God that people like us came to serve them, and I was saying I could never think of saying such a thing. It had something like that happen to me. And we were there actually also over Christmas. So a lot of relief material was given to families. And for their Christmas, whatever celebration in one particular village, Georgepeta, the villagers put everything in baskets and gave it back as an offering. Now, again, that was such a moving experience. They were doing it absolutely authentically. I mean, they didn't expect anything back. And then the final day, we had a very moving sort of all-night sort of dance. There were Adivasi Hamlet also, the bonfire and them all dancing, just wishing us goodbye. That, like I said, no goodbyes here. I'm with y'all. I'm with the community for life, So,
And just listening to those stories, you can really picture a very different era, possibly a more peaceful era, and possibly a more happier era as such, where just being in the community, working with freedom, trying to make a difference to their health as such. So this is where possibly the roots of the community health cell or Sochara began to grow. And this is where I want to bring Dr. Ravi in. We've heard stories of especially the Malur Cooperative Society and how health was intertwined with the Milk Cooperative Society and much more. If you could just tell us in the form of a story as to some initial incidents which led to the birth of Sochara. Like you mentioned, there were 12 other selections along with Muglur as such. What was the initial experience of working as one of the junior or intermediate level faculty in these areas?
Okay, well, basically these 12 were not centers that we did the Sochara, centers of St. John's. I've just finished writing for the Vision Mission document, The Forgotten Decade, because there were 12 community centers, rural and urban, of which Malur was one. So there are 12 stories, and these are stories for some of you very interesting, but some of the urban villages are the ones around us, Mestri Palya, Kartali Palya, Siddhagunta Palya, Bobi Slum, Agara, Jakasandra. They've all become part of Bangalore now, the great Burat Bangalore.
And with a lot of traffic jams.
Yes. The story of Malur is that when I came back from England, just before I came back, St. John's, because it had changed the name of community medicine, had decided to start a health center. And the Department of Community Medicine, under then the leadership of Mari Mascarenhas, Maya's mother, she was assistant professor, but she had become head because the previous professor, Ramaswamy, had retired. She decided, with the help of some sister Anne Cummins, they went to Amul Dairy, and that was a big, thing in all over India, the health the cooperative. And Amul Dairy was providing veterinary services to all their members. And these people went and studied and said, can St. John's think of it? The second big dairy after Amul was the Karnataka Dairy, the NDD, the Karnataka Dairy opposite Christ College. And so they were doing very well. So to cut a long story short, they decided if we can find a cooperative which is doing very well, then instead of only providing veterinary services and providing cooperative services, and cooperatives and Amul has begun to provide schools and improve roads and basically use the profits of the cooperative back into the society. Can we add a health one? And that's how the Malur Health Cooperative started. And I had the unique opportunity of coming back as becoming assistant, put in charge of them. So though Dr. Dara had just started the initial contact because he was there, but he went off for his MD after I came back, and I then happened to be. I just want to say that it's too long a story to say, but basically just three things are important. This was a cluster of villages with 3,000 liters of milk per day sent to Bangalore from three little villages. And we suggested that if they gave 3 to 5 paisa per liter of milk, we'd have enough money to run a health center. Mind you, 2,700 rupees a month was quite a lot of money. We got 1,000 rupees, we got a doctor. And 2 doctors from that Malur, are now well-known public health people. One is Dr. Prithvish, who was retired as Professor of Ramaya, and Dr. Guru Raj, who retired as Professor of Epidemiology in Nimhan. They're both the second and third PSC medical officer. We had 3 village workers, a local lady, a boy who had just finished his PUC, who was trained as a pharmacist. And basically, we ran this. It's a whole story. But what is most important is by 76, 2 years later, the Indian Council of Medical Research identified 14 alternative approaches to healthcare to the PHC model. And Malur was one of them. And after that, we had it evaluated in again. So most people don't understand that Malur was not just a St. John's project. It's a nationally known project as the only project of a medical college in the community, which got national acclaim. Later, we started Silvapura near Hesargata. We started the State Bank of India project in Muglur, with the 4 villages here around Domasandra, and so on. And then, so that was really the sort of thing. And what I wanted to tell you was 2 small things. I'm very proud to say that every Johnite, from George D'Souza downwards, still about assistant professor level, I have bonded, Thelma and I have bonded with them in one of these villages. Vijay Joseph in Bidraguppe, this one in Malur. And every time we meet Salim Yusuf in Malur and Venkat Narayan in Malur. So we have, for us as young staff members, we were bonding in the village because we used to go and live out there, stay with them, visit them.
I think we lost them. I'm sorry. I think there was some technical issue and we have lost them. We'll try to get them back on shortly as such. Stay tuned to this live stream as such. We will try to get them on shortly.
Backstage.
We are backstage.
All right, we apologize for that technical delay as such. What a wonderful story of Malur, which was going on. And really, like you truly mentioned, I think this sends out a story to the youngsters that you don't need to always think of big things. You can do small things, but with big impact as such. And that's where I want to come to Dr. Thelma here. And the Bhopal gas tragedy, in many ways, was a defining point, possibly in your careers as such. Could you just tell us what was the experience in the disaster relief work and how it led to the formation of a group of closely knit people with a common goal as such?
So, Nitin, you see, when we left St. John's, we loved St. John's, but we felt restless because we needed to reach out to communities and in a different way. As I told you, when we were doing the rural work, sometimes I used to think I need 7 generations to to meet the needs of people, because in Mugalur in those days, I was one of the first medical officers there. We used to get people coming in bullock cart loads. Those days, you won't imagine how Muglur was 32 kilometers from St. John. So it was quite rural, very rural actually, next to Chikkatarupati. And there was a lot of poverty in those days in the 70s, So I used to think, and I felt that, something else is needed. There has to be some other way. It can't be just us as doctors running clinics after clinics after clinics. And, there needs to be some other way to leverage the system. Now, when we got this restlessness, we were extremely happy, really loved the place, loved our work and all of that. But there was this restlessness. So we left St. John's
82.
and in 82. And then as we left, the group called the Medico Friends Circle decided to call us and say, why don't you all seem to be free now, why don't you become the national office and secretariat of the Medico Friends Circle? So we thought about it and we said, yes, we are young enough to do so. And we knew many of them actually as friends, but to take on the responsibility was a different thing. We did. And we were hosting the annual meets. And I remember we were meeting in the Indian Social Institute in probably December 1984. 3rd December was the Bhopal gas tragedy that happened. And we received a telegram from groups in Bhopal saying, we urgently need your help. Because this seems to be like a medical disaster, and we don't know what to do. So while we were in a meeting with a whole lot of other fellow travelers, we thought about it, and we felt, yes, we should actually respond to this circumstance that was there. That was another, like the Andhra Pradesh cyclone experience, that was another sort of awakening at a different level for all of us, for many of us actually, because incidentally, as I said, I was from MP. Bhopal was my home for about 4 years. And the home where I stayed was a large bungalow, which was opposite the field on which the Union Carbide factory later came up after my father was transferred from there. So I was going back to my own home, which had become the hospital for the people who were affected in the bastis around the Union Carbide factory. There were a huge number of loss of lives and huge number of people who were affected with a lot of respiratory distress and a lot of other problems. At that stage, the company was only saying that this was like tear gas. They said, it's nothing will happen, everything will be all right and all. We then started doing our little homework and started contacting people around, trying to get information, and we learned from some German research group that actually sodium thiosulfate is a very good antidote to this. It was a cyanogenic type of poisoning that people had, and thiosulfate is a good antidote. And then we realized that some of the elite in Bhopal were actually taking these thiosulfate injections because somehow it had become available. And so we actually set up a clinic, for the people who were affected in the buses who were not then receiving thiosulfate. And it was on the grounds of, and we did a lot of literature review actually at that time, and found out that this was a very complicated, sort of medical disaster, which as we then followed it up over the years, MFC, the Medico Friends Circle, took a huge, community-based epidemiological study. And Ravi was a convener and, convening the groups. We were in touch with the Indian Council of Medical Research also at that time. They were extremely supportive. And then we realized that this was actually going to have long-term effects. The awakening to us was that, why was this company actually located so close to an urban area? Any hazardous company, industry or factory should be 50 kilometers outside an urban location. And there were several small incidents that had happened prior to the major incident. So there was a whole, stories were unraveling one below the other. And I realized that, there was much more to health than just medicine. And there were many other factors. It opened my eyes to sort of political factors, to various other larger societal factors that influence health. So so that's how I then decided to go and do my master's in epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and later continued to do health policy analysis for my doctoral work.
Wow, I mean, really, I mean, there was one line which you told there which sort of really struck a chord, and that is, you think you're coming back to home, but the home has actually become a sort of hospital to cater, and you're seeing something which has been a homeland for at least a few years being devastated by one of the biggest tragedies that India has seen. In HBO, you really had Chernobyl being shown, and possibly the Bhopal gas tragedy stays as a strong reminder as to what can happen when environmentally things can go wrong from a occupational point of view. I would like to end this sort of phase where we are talking about your passion of community health with one last question to Dr. Ravi, and then we are coming to something more special for those of you who are watching, and that is with the theme of the Valentine's Day as such. Dr. Ravi, the birth of Sochara, what were the objectives of it finally, and how did it proceed?
Okay, let me just tell you, it just started a little before, Thelma just mentioned that we left St. John's, but most people didn't know we left St. John's twice. In 1982, we went to Dr. Francis in January and said, listen, we want to leave St. John's. And he said, no, you can't leave St. John's. You guys are so happy and everybody's there very happy. You just take a year off. So we took a year off, and the bishop said, take a year off and come back and rejoin. And that to many of you will be very interesting. We've written about it, but not many people know that we took a whole year, Thelma and I, and traveled around the country. And we visited 4 groups of people. Johnites like Ravindran and Donald Fernandez doing their rural bond. Many sister doctors in Gujarat and other places who were doing sister doctors working as Johnite sister doctors. Many other doctors who were in hospitals with a mission, not necessarily mission hospitals, and our MFC friends. So many of you don't realize that it is these people, when we talk to them and said, listen, we are not into teaching community medicine or preventive, so we want to help you guys. They said, well, you can't help us because whenever we come to colleges and our own medical nursing, nobody knows what we are doing. They don't even do it that way. They're doing it at a higher level, secondary, tertiary care. We are all at primary care. So we really need some help. So don't leave medical college, but just set it up. So we actually came back to St. John's in 83 and we tried to talk. By the time Dr. Francis, who had waved us goodbye, and Bishop Patrick and all of them were so excited about it. It was all in the St. John's annual report. The 2 staff members are traveling around the country and talking to everybody. But when we came back, there was no one to listen to the story. New leadership had changed and they couldn't figure out what we were saying. We said we need to have an extension center. We need to have a center, and I was willing to take it up. They even made me for a year something called the Coordinator Rural Health Service and Training Programs, that we want to work with people who are already in community health and who want to come back in. So we started nurses training, doctors training. In community medicine, we had health workers training. We did that, but after some time, we found that it was not something that people wanted to do, and slowly we decided to leave, and that's how. And then when we left, the first thing that happened in that year was the Bhopal. So that really put us in touch with now, coming to your other questions about Sochara, for 5 years, a group of us, and remember that Sochara is not Ravi and Thelma. Sochara is Ravi, Thelma, Shirdi Prasad of batch 71, Mani Kalyat of batch 68, MJ Thomas of batch, all of us put together, a whole lot of Johnites. And later, Dr. Francis of Dean retired from St. John's, joined Sochara. Dr. Ramarao retired from St. John's, joined Sochara. Paresh Kumar, the sociologist, retired. So to me, Sochara is an extension of St. John's. And recently, Prudvi himself circulated our resignation letter, which I don't know where he found. And in that we have said we are leaving beyond the walls of a medical college to do something, and we will always remain the extension of St. John's. So I want you to understand that Sochara in our mind is not something outside of St. John's. It was the St. John's vision, but outside of a medical college campus. And everything then that we did after that, so many years, has been helping people who have made the choice, community medicine or community health, or go to a community, And over the years, we have begun to work not just with doctors and nurses and health workers, but health is physical, development, health is everything. And today, our learning programs in Sochara are open to people, any young person, any young professional who wants to go and work at the community level. And so that's how Sochara is called the Society for Community Health Awareness Research in Action. And it took a long time before our own friends and colleagues in St. John's began to understand. But if you know the present governance of Sochara, you'll be shocked to find Dennis Xavier is Vice Dean, Maya Thomas is our Treasurer. I mean, not Maya Mask. And then you have Arvind Kasturi is head of our Academic Committee, Manjula or Ethics Committee, Manjula, Mario and all. So Johnites are very much there.
Aditya.
And Aditya has come, Lalit was there for a little while. So many people. So now it's not a Johnite extension. It's the core is Johnite at the heart level. But at the mind level, it's people from TIS and CMC.
No, I think you were very right when you said it's beyond the walls of a medical college. And while many times we use the word rural born, no, we should call it rural service. I still think we should call it rural bond because, like you rightly mentioned, you and Dr. Thelma mentioned, a lot of bonding happens in these rural centers. So from a more positive aspect, we still need to refer it to as the rural bond just because of the sheer bond and connect that is shared with people as
but
such.
Can I disagree with you? I really love the thing of a social obligation. I was, Prem Pius and I were the two first bond officers of St. John's when K.R. Antony's batch started. And we didn't like this word bond because you feel bond, you think it's all a question of paying up some money. I feel it's the best opportunity for young doctors who are nothing more than retractor holders and clinics.
So that's what I meant. I think we should view the bond not as an obligation, but more as, like Dr. Thelma said, the bonding which happens with people and the community as such. So I'm trying to share a photo, and I want you to give. George, is the photo visible? Yes, it is visible now. So I want you to give me your first reactions in this photo, because I know what was happening there on stage as such. So how difficult was it to open that umbrella as such? And then we can see the joy on the face of you when you finally managed to open that umbrella. This was during the Golden Jubilee Culturals. And this was just before you opened the umbrella and when you were thinking, oh gosh, I think doing statistical analysis is possibly better. So, Dr. Thelma, what were you thinking when Dr. Ravi was trying to open the umbrella on stage?
The story behind the umbrella.
I know, actually, that was really hilarious thing. What happened was we had no idea about this song. We then somehow got to see a video about it just the night before. And I found that my father had an old umbrella, which then I thought would be perfect, and we took it. But we never opened it to see whether it would open. So what actually happened was not a planned thing. It was actually, we hadn't tried it out. It wasn't opening. I was like pretty panic stricken, should I say, but was trying to, and I'm not an actor person at all, as you can see. So I was trying to,
I remember.
I would like to say, Nitin, thanks to all the cat calling and all, and many students thought this was part of the act. I was supposed to be a tramp. Rajkumar was a tramp who meets this, very rich and and then offers this. And so they thought it was all part of it by trying to open and not open, but it was actually a fact. And finally it opened, and we cursed you for having, in fact, we remember looking for this umbrella, because at the end of it, you say, hey, Nitin gave us a whole list. We better take, I bought a cap, I bought to have trousers coming up like a tramp, and Thelma has to have her hair done like this and all. We forgot the umbrella. It was just last minute we rushed in, got this old umbrella from her father's days. He never opened that umbrella either for years. And it was quite an interesting experience. But it was,
I think you stayed true to character. Even the umbrella was possibly from the Raj Kapoor Nargis time as such. So you never know. So Dr. Thelma, this is something that the nation wants to know, or probably Johnites want to know. How was Dr. Ravi as a person when you met him in the 70s?
He was a dashing young guy. He was a very, favorite of many people, and only thing I think some people used to say he had flood level pants, because his pants were little, he had those. The early days before the bell bottoms came, I think he did shift to bell bottoms later, but it was the drain pipes which were several feet above his his footwear. But he was a lovely guy. I mean, still is.
Yeah, and he's blushing away as we can see right
No,
now.
I will tell all of you to read Kaveri's book, because among other things, Kaveri has written a small chapter, and in that she could never work out, being a classmate of mine, how this nerdy Tam Bram from Delhi met this plucky Goan girl, and since we didn't know each other as students, there was no, rumors and so on. And suddenly when she came back, inspired by Andhra cyclone, and I got back by East Pakistan refugee camp, we got together. And one thing I must say at this time, though I know you're not asking me questions, but I feel the blushing part of it is, all the rural camp, the Mario was that batch. When we went there, that was the time when, in a way, we were beginning to think, yes, maybe this is more than just a professional partnership. We really maybe wanting, to be a couple. And Mario and all always say that they could see it already happening. And when we came back, a few months later, we took a group of sisters for a training. And the sisters also saw it and wrote a poem called Uncle and Auntie Sitting in the Back of the Van and all that. And we thought it was all fun, but how they were picking up. But the most interesting part is when we decided to get married, we told a few people, and everybody told us they'd been praying for it and they were hoping it was happening. And we were such a nice couple made for each other. It was very uncanny, And the best part, of course, when the 300 medical students, because I was warden of the hostel and a popular one, and that said, listen, don't bother about, we are all going to come for your wedding, so think about that. And so we are the only alumni couple who had their reception in the hospital mess hall, because there's no other way we could get all our students together. And I have a lovely photograph which I'll show during the Jubilee of all the batches, about 60 students who are our volunteers. Our whole marriage is like a college staff meeting. Everybody, including one of the priests who was there, apart as chaplain, there was a student priest, all sorts of people. It's very, very unusual. And it really bonded us even more. Apart from bonding both of us, bonded us with the college.
Yeah. So, Dr. Thelma, very interestingly, both of you have also had the privilege of being parents of a Johnite as such. Just to touch upon a fact which not many people talk about, or not many opportunities that come about, how was the experience of transitioning from being a Johnite to also taking on the responsibility of being the parent of a Johnite with Lalit? Were you very strict and said curfew time, like how it's there in the hostel and you have to return home at this point of time? Or were you giving him directions that this is the path you need to take? How essentially was parenting Lalit as such?
Well, I would say from the very early days of babyhood, we were never directed. In fact, he used to come along with us for all our events and meetings and this and that. In fact, from the age of I think about a year and a half, he's been coming for MFC meetings. So he's been made a life member because he came at age 2, 3, 4, and in between. So he was. We never had any curfews or any such thing, and he has always, right through life, had the full freedom to do exactly what he wants, So
let me just add a few things, because I've just recently, a few months ago, sat with Lalit in Washington when I was there, and I talked about him. And I talked about this and what he felt. I just want to say 2-3 things. Lalit actually started environmental health in St. Joseph's. He was very interested in ecology and so on, and he started that. And then he went for fun to St. John's for the interview 1 month after he had started environment, under Father Saldana and St. Joseph's. Just because all the other classmates, they were all, Bishop Cotton boys had done St. Joseph's, and then 2 years PUC in Bishop Cotton's, and they all went there. And we never even told anybody that he was going to apply or he wanted to. And when he asked us, we said, go if you feel like. He went there. And he did very well. And then when Dr. Mary Olapalli and Dr. Father Kalam discovered that, we also told him, don't say you're Lalit Narayan, just say Lalit. Don't say, because you don't want to be under the shadow of two, Narayan parents who are there. And so just say Lalit. So he kept saying Lalit, though the name was there, they didn't look into all that. And later they said, how come you've gone all these community experiences? And then he said, oh, Ravi and Thelma, mine. Then they rang us up and said, why didn't you tell us? We said, what are we going to tell you? St. John's doesn't give into any such, thing. And so, but his friends used to call him, which I know maybe I should take his permission, Comet Putra, because he told me for the first time after years that he was called Comet Putra because when they all became students, they knew that, his mother and father were there. And we kept a firm distance. Those 10 years he was student, we kept a safe distance from St. John's because we didn't want him to feel Comet Putra. And we had anyway left St. John's, we were busy. But he kept hearing that. He go to the rural camp and he was told, oh no, your parents only started the first rural camp and he went to Mangalore or Malur, whatever. And it was something that worked, but basically he was left completely on his own. And it's only when after he joined Rural Bond on his own, again, not any force was, that we re-linked with St. John's. So we we always believed, Khalil Gibran says, the children are gifts of God, not for your destiny, but for their destiny. And he was brought up in that way.
Yeah, that was wonderfully put. We have one question coming in from Prithvi as such. And the question to Dr. Thelma, if you could take it, I'm sure this hasn't been an easy journey. So what was it that drove you both every day during those difficult times or when things would seem gigantic as such?
Well, I think, of course, there are difficult times, and especially, when you face up with all these challenges, as I said, we had gone to Patiala at the height of the movement there, the Khalistani and other movement for a medical friend circle meeting. And so there were issues of, security and vigilance and, all sorts of things. But I think it was a deep down, I'm not sure whether I mentioned this before, but my father was actually in the INA. So he worked with Subhash Chandra Bose, directly. And so I was always deeply sort of, in a way, motivated by that experience of his. And he was a commander of a guerrilla regiment, and it's all written about, actually. It's in the public domain. So, and all my childhood, I've been traveling around rural parts of India, and we always used to stop by and talk to farmers and, how's the, crops going and all of that. So I think that deep passion, Ravi equally has this from his mother and his family and others, that so we have a very deep connect with, people of India. So it may be our imagination of people, but also a real life thing. So I think that passion keeps us definitely overcomes challenges. And also I would say there's a faith dimension. We are an interfaith marriage, as you know, and but we have a very interesting commonness in the way we practice our faith. So it's a daily interfaith dialogue, you may say. So the two together are actual love for what we do, and also plus a faith and whatever, that providence will take care of things. In Sochara, they know when we say the financial thing, we say, oh, providence will take care.
Right. We have one more question coming in from Chandralekha Kona, and this question, if both of you could take, actually, which is, how has community health changed over the years? I mean, you have been seeing it for possibly now more than 4 decades as such. What are your reflections on how it has changed over the years?
Well, I would say that, we still talk about public health, but those of us who use this word community health used it with a certain purpose, because public was slowly getting lost in public health. Public health is still like one of the biomedical models, top down, experts telling you what to do and so on, and not bring in community health. So we now talk about 2 types of community health. Many people have moved from community medicine to health, but they're actually still medical model, biomedical model. And they're still top-down, expert-driven, and so on. Whereas we are saying we are not idealizing it. We have all experienced that community getting involved in their own well-being is ultimately what all this tap turning off is. And, and therefore, and we were thrilled when St. John's moved from St. John's Medical College to St. John's National Academy of Health Sciences, when community medicine moved to community health department. And, everywhere things are now, we've got a vice dean of outreach. So to us, community health is growing. My only concern, it has been that over the years, in the public health field, community health is also now getting very professionally driven. And a lot of people are beginning to feel that this is just a new public health. You say community, but you are not really getting involved. So there are like two groups within the community health: those who are very academic and research oriented and community medicine, still top down, expert driven. And there's a whole there's a whole movement, and that's the whole people's health movement, which we were not only part of, but we initiated and so on. And we hope that in the years to come, these groups will begin to see that they are not really two opposing forces. There is in community health empowering and enabling communities. There is also system development that makes systems more easy for communities to handle. And today, words like communitization in the National Rural Health Mission, we are very thrilled with, because we are also deeply involved with that word. And Thelma is the national advisor on ASHA mentoring group and all this sort of thing. So a lot of this work has become there. And I think slowly public health, community medicine are all beginning to coalesce, and together. And basically each one's finding their own, space without feeling that the other one is different. Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the most needed space when we speak about public health. With all the talk of artificial intelligence and all, it's going to be very interesting as to what new dimension public health or community health would take forward. But like you rightly said, the emphasis is on health, as we all know, and not just medicine as such. Alina, who is doing some wonderful rural work from Gudlur, has written that it's wonderful and inspirational to hear about your journey. She would like to read about what you both wrote about your travel year. As such, she's possibly referring to the year that you took off and traveled to the different parts of the country. So, Alina, we will put you in touch with both Dr. Ravi and Thelma, and you could read as such.
All of you who are interested, go to our website, www.sochara.org. It has everything, starting from our resignation letter of what you wanted to do, and there's notes on a year of travel and reflection and all sorts of things. I'm sure Prudvi, who's been busy reading our website of late, knows more about it and can put you on
Nitin, just one little thought that now those dichotomies of clinical, community and public health are slowly blurring, and that there is a continuum, and that's what I think will be the way and the wave forward, that we are all part of the same process, so we don't have to waste energy but if we recognize that communities actually have their own rich traditions, and every patient has their own thought process and thinking, and we treat them as equal and have time listening to them, what is their conceptual understanding of what they're going through, how can they be motivated to, that would make a world of difference. And now even in all the global, literature, as well as thinking, community engagement, community participation is the buzzword, for everything. In fact, I'm going for a meeting next week for TB, and looking at community action for tuberculosis of the National TB Elimination Program, because they've tried with dots and cots and all of that, but they still haven't actually got over that how do you treat, like the Adivasis who taught me in Andhra Pradesh, their resilience, their ability, their strength in times of difficulty, they had the strength, not me, so how do we tap into that strength of a person?
Yeah. I think a very important point that you make, and like you said, the lines are blurring, and I think all of us at the end of the day, as clinicians who are working, are treating the people of the community. But the most important thing for all the youngsters and everyone watching out is take time to listen to the patient, understand their traditions, and more importantly, we should always try to ensure that the treatment or policies that we sort of recommend to them must always be sort of complementary to their tradition, and we should try to not browbeat them or try to criticize one's tradition. I think very words of valuable wisdom that you have passed on as such. Nicholas Pereira from 79 batch sends his best regards and congratulations for a lifetime of achievements in the healthcare ministry, that he puts it beautifully as such. I come to the last part of this, and that is the rapid fire round. I'm going to take your Viva right now, both Dr. Ravi and Thelma, and it's going to be the fun round as such. So Dr. Ravi, I'm going to put you on the spot. It's the week of Valentine. I have to ask you, what is Dr. Thelma's favorite color?
Green.
And you have to judge him. You have to mark him correct.
It's correct. Yeah.
She's wearing
Absolutely.
it, as you can see, for a Valentine Day.
All right. What would be her favorite food?
You have to say.
Well, she has many favorite foods, but I'm just trying to figure out, maybe strawberries and cream. We've been having it every day for the last few days.
Dr. Thelma, any thoughts, or what would Dr. Ravi's favorite dish be?
Oh, well, it started with Tayashadam, it moved into chicken and various other delicacies.
All right,
But
that's great.
Tayashadam wins.
What Thelma is not telling you is that the three men in her family, her two sons and her husband, are all PhDs in home science. Thelma made sure that as she became a really liberated, not a feminist, but a liberated professional, the only way she could do that in a patriarchal world is to get her husband and two sons to become PhDs in home science. So we are really good at it.
So she possibly empowered the Narayan household to
Yes.
become a PhD in house sciences.
That's why she's busy running around the country advising everybody from the Lancet to
What
ICMR to everybody.
would your favorite books be? Any impactful book? Both of you might have your own personal choices, but that one book which is your favorite as such?
Well, of lately, I've had many favorites right through the year. Ivan Illich, Medical Nemesis, has been the oldest one because it really put us on the track, where medicine is going to be its own nemesis. And it's a very philosophic book, but it's there. And now recently, another one which I'm reading, I read many books. I found Kaveri's book, the latest one. The earlier one was a novel on St. John's with all of us in it, but we were all named differently. And that was the Hills of Angeri. But this one is all about her personal life, and I feel not only her personal life, but also her. Every time it comes to health systems and all, she talks about it. That's a very moving one. And similarly, I've got a whole collection of doctor chronicles, which means doctors talking from their life experience, surgeons, community medicine, everybody.
Dr. Thelma, yours?
Atul Gawande and people like that also.
Yeah, actually, I also have a long. We both love reading, so you'll see all the books around. We're actually sitting in a garage, which has been, So I don't say I would have one particular book, but yes, Ivan Illich was, a change maker and influenced our thinking and our work. The other person, I'm missing his name. We use that paradigm shift. The
Rose.
Jeffrey Rose, who was my professor, he wrote Epidemiology for the Uninitiated. It's actually now out of print, but it's a wonderful book. If it's written in a very readable style, and I would definitely recommend that for anybody who's interested. Because, but otherwise, novels. I mean, we read a whole lot of them.
Nitin, I was hoping you would ask us which films we like.
Yeah, exactly. I'm coming to that. Have you jumped onto the bandwagon of the Netflixes, the Amazon Primes? Any shows that you binge watch, or are you the traditional movie goers? And what would your favorite movies be?
Well, two movies that really moved me, and we use it now in our training also: The Three Idiots and Tare Zameen Pe, because in a beautiful story, they sort of also talk about, technology, community, technology, health, all sorts of things. But Thelma and I recently, because we are now we're not Netflix addicts, but we do look at it. We've begun to look at other films. So RR and all those sorts of, Bahubali, which we never had before. But now we had a little more time. We're beginning to enjoy a different sort of
different experience. All right. So I'd like to end this. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I would like to end with closing final thoughts before I get Prithvi to come in to thank everyone who has joined in as such. As to both of you have been advisors in various capacities, various top position to various government bodies, the Lancet and all that. What would your one vision be for medical education or St. John's going forward? Dr. Thelma, followed by Dr. Ravi to have the last word. Yeah.
Well, I think medical education is going through a real flux, and I really hope that, a lot of youngsters form a critical mass to engage with these medical education decision-making bodies, as you all know, NECs and, all of that, which is causing a lot of distress to a lot of people, and it's not necessarily improving, thing. I know you've been very vocal on this, Nitin, and I hope you continue and have a big group along with you who would engage with the concerned people, this the National Medical Council and others, because if there's not a large critical mass in different medical colleges and student bodies, all I can say from experience of over these 40 years, that change is possible. And ultimately, we are a democratic society and people do hear what we have to say. So I think that process of engagement is not yet strong enough between the students, the teachers, and these decision-making bodies. It's left to just a few people, who will engage. So I think that deeper thing is needed. India, as you know, set up 240 medical colleges, new medical colleges since 2014. That's actually a ridiculous number, because where are the faculty? What's the quality? What's happening? I'm actually very worried for what's happening to medical education today. And the quality of students are getting a raw deal, in the type of teacher. Not in St. John's is a different story. I mean, in St. John's, I think definitely it is one of the good colleges. I think coming to St. John's, I think a closer connect between the teachers and this very large number of medical students, 150, we had a very close bond, and that bond is what, and that's why I like your take on the bond scheme. The bond between the teachers, the bond between the students, the teachers and the students was very close. Even the governing board had a close bond with us. They used to come and play, musical chairs and various things with us. So all those, linkages have become very distant now at every level. So I think if we can bridge all those gaps, and the Jubilees are a great time to actually, create that momentum. But as I was saying right in the beginning, we have to maintain the momentum. Before the Golden Jubilee, there was a lovely momentum that had developed, but it all went a bit, like it fizzled out quite soon after the Jubilee, after the party, everything was over. But now we have to learn from that and make sure, in the interests of George, Megha, and all the younger ones, that that they have that lovely warm experience when they think back of their medical college days, not just of their friends, but of that entire experience. Because from what I gather, there is that sense of alienation, that sense of anomie, as you say, that people are on their own. Sometimes people don't know, they're not listening to the voices of people. Like, to give you one small example, the lovely lawns, but people are not allowed to sit on it and chat, as happens in most other, lawny places, so we have to become more humane, I think, at every level.
Yeah, and it's all about the connect. Dr. Ravi, your closing words.
Well, I'm going to say, you had prepared me for answering one question which you didn't ask. I won't bring it up, but I think for me, it always starts there. My 10 years as a hostel warden, and I think my connect with St. John's, which everybody talks about, is always started there, because all the good and the bad and the ugly, everything that I connected with, I kept in touch. But I'm trying to link that to the question you've asked. I think the most important hope I have, whether for India in medical education, whether for St. John's, is that it's your students who are out there, who are doing what you want them to do, what you train them to do. Doesn't matter if it's primary, secondary, tertiary, research. You have to have feedback loops, because otherwise people who are in each department, the departments become like little silos. They don't even talk to each other, leave alone talking to. And now we're going to have these seminars and so on in departments, and but don't just have a celebration. Let them all come together and tell them, I'm in touch with so many of them I knew as hostel friends, some in trouble, some not in trouble, some doing very well, all the way from Salim Yusuf or down. But today I can tell you some of them, or not quite a large number of them, are doing such fantastic work. I wish the students of St. John's, the staff of St. John's would know. And not just, Salim Yusuf up there and we down here in community. There's a whole range. I mean, I can think of about 100 people I could just name, saying vice chancellors and heads of cancer institutes and professors and researchers and community people. And I really feel if the Jubilee can link these people up, and that's why Prithvi I can see is there smiling away. I'm really hoping that before I get too old and Alzheimer's takes over, to help Prithvi and the Alumni Association build up a website section of the Alumni Association called the Spirit of St. John's, where all the fun and the achievements and so on that people want to share with everybody else gets shared. Not the formal official version from the Alumni Association or the colleges. Okay, those websites are necessary. But the fun part, when I say fun, it also means people who've had deeply professional experiences that have made impacts and would like to share. And I can think of hundreds of Johnites who are doing that. And it's not just a wish. I mean, and that's why one of the favorite Johnite books for me is this one. I don't know how many of you know that. To me, this is a directive. Thelma and I always look at it because whenever we bump into a Johnite, as long as in the first 35 years, thanks to Meenakshi, Ramu and others who did this, this is the way to find out who they are, what they are doing now. I believe I also in the grapevine hear that this is used for matchmaking among Johnites, but that's a different issue that Meenakshi can answer. But anyway.
By the way, before we close, I'd just like to say one word of tribute to my batch of 71. I have always said I think we are one of the best batches, but I'm sure every batch thinks the same.
Yeah, that's something which will be hotly contested. Prithvi and me might get into a fighting match with each other now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was very wonderful, and I think you said it yourself in your last statement. John's all has to be about the connect. It has to be the spirit of St. John's, and it has to be it has to be beyond the walls. It has to be beyond the websites. It has to be about stories. It has to be about that connect, right from people in 1963 right up to 2023 as such. I would like to take this opportunity before Prithvi gives just thanks everyone. I would like to thank George, the outgoing president of the Student Executive Committee, I think very shortly, who just after his RGHS exams has been kind enough to set up this entire platform. George, if you could put yourself on and give a big wave to everyone. Thank you so much. And I leave the stage to Prithvi as such. Thank you, George. A big round of applause to George from wherever you're sitting out there. Prithvi, all yours to close the session. Thank you all once again for tuning to Johnite Tales Season 2. We will be very shortly back with Episode 3.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, George, for that excellent background work. Hello, everyone. This actually brings us close to the end of second episode. It felt really short because the stories were so many. So I would like to thank the Alumni Association, the Executive Committee especially, putting and pushing us, me, Nitin, and especially Dr. Anthony Robert, to go through this effort and making a list of all the people who can potentially be the speakers. And thanks, Nitin, for this engaging interview. And Ravi and Thelma. Wow, that's all I have to say. It's such amazing stories connecting from Bhopal gas tragedy to East Pakistan to Andhra cyclones to Johnite kids to I don't know where to look. That itself is an encyclopedia out there. I mean, really, wow. So thank you for these lovely stories, and we have so much to learn. I'm sure there are so many current rural service guys who are listening and tuning into these videos. You have inspired so many across the decades. I think this video will inspire so many more. For so many more batches coming together in the future. So thank you again for that. And thank you all the viewers for your patient listening. And before I say the last line, I would like to request all the Johnites of all the batches. There are so many, like Ravi mentioned, there are so many people in your own batch, your seniors, juniors. Please connect with us, write to us, and tell us their stories, and we will highlight them. Because like throughout today's episode is all about stories. Stories make difference. So Ravi is full of stories, and I would love to listen to those stories sitting in front of him. How I call them Ravi and Thelma and not Dr. Ravi and Dr. Thelma is the connect I have with him. And that is something Ravi and Thelma both insist that, you're not doctor, not sir, not madam. I mean, end of the day, we are Johnites, be it senior, junior, be it consultant, be it resident, whoever you are. So I think thanks, Ravi, for engaging me all these months and years. and still looking forward to bring out more and more of your stories. And please register onto our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, wherever we are. Please write to us, connect with us. And I'm Prithvi Dasri signing off. Thank you.
Thank you all viewers for joining in. This is the end of the Johnite Tales episode 2. Like I said, we'll be back with episode 3 very shortly. This is the job of every social media video that we end. So please like, subscribe to the official YouTube page of St. John's Medical College Alumni Association. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook. So please follow us and please register on the website if you have not, because then only you will be able to get updates to all the wonderful events which are happening across connected by the Alumni Association. With that, thanks a very big.
I think Ravi wants to say something.
Yeah.
No, I don't. No, I was not. I was just drinking some water.
So that's the first time I've actually heard
Stories for later when we.
Yeah, he's reserving the stories that we want to listen it to at Diamond Jubilee as such. So please start pre-registering and letting us know whether you're coming to as well. Until then, on behalf of the St. John's Medical College Alumni Association, Dr. Nitin Yeshas saying goodbye. All of you stay safe, take care, and we hope to connect with you soon, as always, from the Alumni Association.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Yes, bye.